You're now live, Chair.
Ah, fab, thank you. Okay, before we start, I've just got to read out some words, okay? So, good evening, I'm Councillor Chris Payne, Chair of this committee. I would like to inform everybody present that this meeting will be broadcast live to the internet via the Council's website and will be capable of repeated viewing. The images and sound recording may be used for training purposes within the Council. In order to ensure that the meeting is managed effectively, can everybody keep to the following guidelines for speaking? Councillors should only use raise your hand function to request to speak. Only speak when invited to do so by the chair. Please switch off your camera and microphone when not speaking, and remember to set your mobile phone to silent for the duration of the meeting. Any views expressed by any speaker in this meeting are the speaker's own, and they do not necessarily reflect the views of the council. Please can councillors be aware that the webcast will continue to be streamed live 20 seconds after the close of the meeting. This is due to a time delay in the transmitting live. I now confirm the names of the other members of this committee: Councillor Bell, Councillor Clark, Councillor Collins, Councillor Cross, Councillor Gruby, Councillor R. McEwen, Councillor Quinn, Councillor Reddy, Councillor Siddle, Councillor Sizeland, and Councillor Joe Taylor. So, Rachel, just first part of the agenda, do we have any apologies for absence?
No, Chair.
Thank you. Second item on the agenda is to receive any disclosures of interest on any matters before the committee. Does anybody have a disclosable pecuniary interest? Okay, or any other interests? Okay, thank you. I don't think we've had any matters referred to the committee under the call-in procedure.
None, Chair.
No. Okay, so the next item on the agenda is to approve the minutes of the previous meeting. They are on pages 3 to 8. Has anybody got any comments or queries about the minutes of the previous meeting? No? Okay. Could I have a proposer for the minutes of the previous meeting, please? Councillor Siddle, and seconded by Councillor Clark. Thank you, everyone. So the next item on the agenda was to be the annual report 24-25. I've agreed that this item will be deferred because it's not quite ready yet and will be available for the next meeting. Councillor Bob McEwen, do you have a question?
No, I'm just trying to get my hand down.
Oh, okay. No problem. Okay, brilliant. Thanks, Bob. So the next item on the agenda is the workforce development, training development, apprentices and graduates, pages 9 to 28. And I think that's yourself, Tanya, is it? Unless Alan's got something to say in advance.
I'm just going to say a few words, if that's all right, Chair.
Okay, that's fine. Thank you.
Right, there's some points within the report that I'd like to pick out in terms of the training and what we're actually trying to get out of it. In terms of investments in graduates, trainees and apprentices, I'm very pleased to see that we've got some trainees and that they're progressing, and some apprentices, both in terms of how they're doing and progressing up through into the higher the structure. And the Alliance is investing. So we've got 2 apprentices, one in customer services and one in finance. So a trainee accountant, that's good. A trainee accountant is doing very well, thank you very much, and is now a business partner. In addition, we've got 12 colleagues across 4 services that hold career grading positions that are sort of middle gradings, and that's providing a clear pathway for progression. But we are spending, as you can see from the expenditure, a considerable amount of money more on our employees. It's up by basically 2/3, and that is trying to give our employees as much help as they possibly can to get them the skills up, the knowledge up, and to deliver better and high quality services for the High Peak Borough Council, and of course, because some of them work for the Alliance as well. But this is in preparation for LGR, that trying to get their skills up so that they will be more employable if they want to go elsewhere. So we're trying to invest in our workforce to retain them for our services, and then go on and work for our replacement services, our replacement councils. So finally, I'd just like to say that the last two paragraphs of the actual report, the report considers a wider context of LGR, which I've just talked about, and explains how regular communications, which is also important in terms of what's happening and how it's happening via LGR. Overall, the information demonstrates the Alliance is ongoing commitment to developing people, skilled, adaptable, and supported workforce capable of delivering high quality services. And really, if there's any, the rest of it is there in the report. So if there's any questions, please ask away. And if I don't know, Tanya will sort me out, will help me out.
So has anybody got any questions on the report? So in the absence of anybody up the hand, I'll Councillor Quinn.
Yeah, I've looked through and I am quite interested in terms of senior grades. Do we have any information about the number of senior grade staff who live in High Peak?
Tanya.
Yes, I do. It's quite evenly split. So between High Peak and Staffordshire Moorlands, but we do have all the details and all the profiles for the workforce, and we've been working on that in preparation for the LGR as well. So, but we do have the details.
Okay, will that be available for us?
I can certainly provide a summary for you if you want to.
Yeah, I'd find that interesting if that is okay, please.
Yeah, okay.
Thank you.
Okay. Councillor Collins.
Yeah, I've got a couple of questions sort of around communications. So our future group sounds really good as a way of sort of connecting up and down. But there don't seem to be that many meetings considering it's LGR. In that, I think there were going to be 9 meetings over the next couple of years, and there were 4 meetings last year. So
yeah. That's the formal meetings of the actual. So it's basically it's a network that we have of staff.
Yeah.
So we have a formal meeting every quarter, but we work on lots of different projects in between. So when we worked on the values, we had a number of representatives from the network who specifically focused on working with us to produce the values. And those meetings are sort of weekly. So there's a mixture of different meetings, but we formally get together for half a day every quarter. But it doesn't. There's lots of other things going on as well.
Good, thank you.
It's also sorry, John. Sorry to interrupt. It's also true that the chief executive is going round all the staff by department. Now, I know for a fact he's done that twice so he's, and this is not just for High Peak, this is for Staffordshire Moorlands as well. So I know that's happening, and I think they're coming and getting a good response.
Good, thank you. And the other question was actually just that there seemed to be quite a lot of kind of online updates, and I wondered if there was any information about whether they're actually looked at, because well, I know from the organisation I worked in, this wasn't the best way of communicating. I mean, it's good to hear the chief exec is doing doing sort of informal stuff and so on, but yeah.
Yes, we can see how many views every single post has had and which ones are have got a bigger reach. So we're monitoring that all the time to make sure that we do engage, and we are engaging with as many staff as possible, but we can see exactly how many views we've had, how long people have been on the page. So we are monitoring it very closely, and we do part of the Alliance network is about two-way communication. So what the members of the network do, they have a slot at their monthly team meeting to sort of bring everybody up to date
Yes.
with what's happening
No, I mean,
corporately,
yeah. No,
and to feed it back. So we do it face to face as well.
okay, good, thank you.
Any other questions? If not, I'm going to ask Tanya the one that I tipped her off about earlier. So when you read through the report, you can see the sort of numbers of people who work for High Peak in Staffordshire Moorlands out of the total population of people. But one of the things that's quite striking is the number of people over 50. And I was just looking for Tanya to talk to us about that, what the risks are and what we do about a sort of potentially aging workforce.
Yes, obviously it is quite common in many councils for the workforce to follow a similar profile to ours. Obviously, what we do is we try to put plans in place to plan for succession within teams. So a lot of the career graded posts and the apprentice posts we put in, as part of that, we're actually trying to future-proof that service area. So we do keep an eye on it constantly, but it is the norm for councils like ours. It's a lot of, and the norm is also for many of the staff who have been here for a long time as well. So it's not just the aging workforce. They're an established, and there's a lot of information. So it's about making sure we retain that information. But that's basically, we review every vacancy as it comes up and look at the best way to fill it, but with the mindset of we need to bring in younger people to plug those gaps, basically.
Thanks, Tanya. I mean, it's a lot of experience, which is a good thing, but it comes with a bit of risk. So when I hear Alan talking about bringing in trainees and apprentices, I think that's sort of a positive view. And you and I were also talking earlier, as we go into LGA, is probably getting a view of how that sits across the totality of all the other councils.
Yeah, certainly once we get a decision, then we'll start to be, all the councils will be looking at that sort of profile. Okay.
So if there's no other questions, thanks for the report. It was illuminating. There's quite a lot of detail in it. I think the recommendation was just for us to note the report. So I think it's duly noted. Thanks, Tanya, for providing us with the detail. And we can move on to the next item on the agenda, which is the trade union report.
Again, yes, that's me. This report it's an annual report that we bring to the committee just to give you an overview of what we have been in discussions with the unions about. So the report as it stands lists everything that's discussed. The appendix sort of gives a summary of discussion at the meetings. As you can imagine, it's mainly things like TUPE policies, but one of the big things that has been that have been discussed over the last 12 months have really been the LGR position. So it's, again, happy to answer any questions on anything specific, but it is as it's stated in the report and the appendix.
So are there any questions for Tanya on the trade union report? No, oh, it seems like you've done an excellent job there, Tanya. There's no questions. So I'll just give people a couple of seconds. No, okay. There were two recommendations. One was that we should note the report, which is duly noted. The second one was to produce an update on the trade union liaison on an annual basis. I don't think it was looking for us to vote on it. It just looks like something that you're going to do. So unless there's any objections, we'll take that as agreed. I think we We discussed this last year, though. I think we normally do get a report. So,
We only last year was the first year
right,
that
okay.
we produced it, but it's just to say we'll continue because I think
We'll
it's
continue
useful.
to do it, okay. Which I think is important in the current climate with local government reorg. Okay, so the next item on the agenda is the legacy plan. And I think that's Anthony.
Thanks, Chair. The report that's before members this evening is seeking to set out essentially what the council's intentions are around sort of what we're calling our legacy plan. As members will be aware, we've had a variety of reports to this committee on the theme of local government reorganisation, based on sort of what we've been told so far by government, and from the consultation and the other stages that have gone before it. All the proposals, etc., have now been submitted to government. We're effectively awaiting a final decision from government as to what the shape of LGR will mean within for the High Peak and for the rest of Derbyshire, and similar for Staffordshire to Moorlands. So what we're starting to look at next is essentially what's going to be, although we've got the existing borough plan that was due to sort of run until 2027 when the next borough elections were scheduled to be. What we're starting to look at now is sort of how can we sort of reshape what's within that and effectively boil it down to what are the things we'd like to get done effectively before we cease to exist as a separate council and are sort of rearranged into whatever the new arrangement will be. So within the report that you've got before you this evening, you've got the starting section of the report sort of sets out where we're up to essentially in terms of sort of the existing borough plan and some of the elements around that. It then moves out to setting out sort of a legacy plan based around 4 particular themes, and we'll go through those in a little more detail shortly. And then as the annex to the report that you got before you this evening, you've got the detailed delivery plan in terms of any of the larger schemes. There are also a whole host of smaller schemes that aren't detailed within it that we're either sort of considering effectively as basically existing day-to-day business that will just get sort of a little bit more of a focus on as we move forwards, or that where there's some elements that we're still going through just a little bit of not quite due diligence, but just making sure we've got all the details of it together in terms of what are we likely to be able to achieve by the time we get to 2028. So if you move forward in the report to page 64, you'll see we've got a couple of sections sort of detailing out the 4 themes within the plan. We're theming them around growth. So issues that are around the council's, to a certain extent, recently passed sort of growth strategy that went through economy and growth, and what are the ambitions within that with a bit more focus on, and in some cases it may well be around stopping certain elements of it, but what can we get achieved between now and 2028, but also sort of what the elements that there may well be a number of projects, and some of these are long-term ones like the second bridge at Whaley Bridge, etc., or for example, sort of I know the chair sort of expressed an interest around, is there anything we can do to sort of encourage MCA to look at some sort of science zone focused around Harper Hill? What are the things that we need to do to be able to sort of get those projects further up the list? So that's all within the growth theme. And that includes elements as well around sort of the local plan and work that's underway to try and move that forward. The second theme is around service improvement and preparations for LGR. So that's again sort of wanting to continue the existing journey to sort of improve services where we can, but also starting that sort of finer and in some cases that little bit of a harder look in terms of what are the preparations that we're going to need to put in place for LGR. And in some cases that'll mean sort of the work that's been partly covered within the training report that we've had earlier on the agenda, just in terms of what are the preparations that we're getting in place to make sure that our staff are as well prepared as they can be for whatever comes next, and to a certain extent have the choice of the right option, whatever that may be, in terms of the future for those. Because one of the sort of certainties that we know from the arrangements for LGR is we know that our current alliance arrangements won't be able to continue in the same way, and we will have to go through a process of sort of separating our staff between the two councils. We don't expect that we'll end up doing that as a literal exercise. We suspect it'll be more so done as just as part of the process. So you won't end up with a point where a member of staff that you may have dealt with for quite a while won't be able to take inquiries from the High Peak because the Staffordshire Moorland based. We're sort of trying to make sure that we can get the arrangements as flexible as possible, but also make sure that everyone is prepared as possible for whatever comes next. And as Alan mentioned, some of the briefings that the chief exec's been doing are as part of that process in terms of sort of keeping our staff up to date. The third theme of the legacy plan is around efficiency. And despite sort of the, depending on your turn of phrase, the sort of the budget cuts or financial pressures that council's been under for the last decade or more, we've still got to make sure that we're getting sort of good value for money and making sure that we're using the funding that we've got available in the best way possible. So that covers a range of schemes that are themed around efficiency, but also in some cases it's around looking at how we've got some of our services operating, particularly those through the council-owned companies, just to make sure that we're getting as much as we can out of them. And then a fourth phase, and probably the one that I suspect in time will sort of get most focus and engagement from members, is around locality and engagement. As members will be aware, one of the intentions that the government has set out in terms of the new arrangements is that the new councils, whatever shape they may take, will need to have strong sort of neighbourhood arrangements, or some variation of area forums or something similar to that. So what we're doing as a council in particular, and it's fingered within this phase, is around looking at sort of bulking up neighbourhood sort of legacy plans to make sure that everything that we need to know and that would be useful for a new authority to need to know in terms of issues that are coming up within our particular patches are sort of all collected together in one place. We're utilising a little bit of the UK SPF money to be able to make sure we can get these legacy plans put together in the best way possible. And we've got some additional support coming in from Mutual Ventures to be able to help us to do that. So they're looking not only at sort of what are the current issues that we've got within particular patches, but also taking that longer term look, sort of 5-10 years in advance. What are some of those things that are coming up that might not be an issue now, but may well be a little bit further on? In terms of that sort of localities set up, we're working on the basis of the sort of the traditional sort of 4 patches that this type of work is normally done on across the High Peak: Glossopdale, Hope Valley, Central, and Buxton, and what we've called Southern Peak, to sort of include all the sort of surrounding Buxton. And we're going through that process to make sure that as part of the legacy plans, all the different partners, agencies, voluntary bodies, and where we've got them, town and parish councils, are sort of fully engaged in the process of putting these plans together. And in some cases, it's already throwing up sort of additional bits of, not necessarily additional bits of work, but just bits of sort of fresh thinking in a sense, in terms of, for example, with the Hope Valley parishes and the discussions that we've had so far, there's a strong emphasis and input around making sure that we're working with all the parishes across the whole of the Hope Valley. So that will include the ones in the Derbyshire Dales as it is at current, and sort of looking at making sure that in terms of the preparation work we're doing, we're sort of collecting all that information together and getting everything arranged in such a way that sort of when the new authority comes into being, we've already got sort of a good set of proposals around how they should be looking at some of this neighbourhood working and now locality plans, sort of to make sure that those issues that are important to us on a local basis are already sort of documented in a sense, and where there needs to be particular plans, they're sort of on a shelf, ready and waiting for the new authority to come into being. And then finally, the last part of the report details the individual schemes so far. But as I said, sort of, whilst it's got most of them in, it's not quite got everything in just yet. There are some additional schemes that will come through, but also in the case of sort of some of the smaller bits. So, for example, I know we've had some requests from members around sort of replacing street bins and things like that. Those will be dealt with just as part of the normal course of sort of day-to-day business. And with that, Chair, happy for any comments or questions.
Thanks, Anthony. I think that was a good trot through the report. Has anybody got any questions? Councillor Groovy.
Yeah, I know it's early days yet, and I'm not absolutely really looking for, you know, a really complete answer. But when you're talking about the neighbourhood forums, will they be looking at residents' associations that already exist? Sort of thinking like in Buxton, we already have Harper Hill residents and Roper. Will they be considered as a neighbourhood?
We're in terms of the process that we're going through to sort of pull together the legacy plans, and in terms of the bodies that we're trying to engage with, we are including sort of where they exist and where we know about them, existing residents associations, to sort of include them in the mix. Because particularly for sort of Glussetdale and Buxton, to a certain extent, we've not got an existing parish or town council covering either patch. So there's a need to sort of just make sure that we've got all those bodies on a list. Because although sort of, you know, if you look, for example, at sort of the Buxton end, we've got We Are Buxton. They include many of the bodies, but not necessarily all of them. And there will be, in some cases, it may well not be the ideal approach or the ideal body to sort of take on that neighbourhood forum role. It may well be that we need something else to make sure that we've got all the different parts of the community involved. And in some cases, it may well be that we have to look at how we can structure it in such a way that sort of all of those voices can be heard. Because in some cases, sort of, you know, in the nicest way possible, it may well be that there's particular issues that, say, the Harper Hill Residents Association flag up that Roper may not. And similar in terms of sort of some of the services that Roper offer, they could be useful elsewhere in the community. And it may well be a case of sort of how can we work with some of the existing community groups to be able to get those sort of similar services available.
Yeah. Okay, thanks. That's reassuring. Thank you.
Councillor Collins. I think you're on mute. There you go.
I've got a few things. Well, the main Hope Valley one, actually, I mean, there are a couple of things, you know, I don't know what's happening with Move More, for example. It'd be nice to have a report at some point because it's not very visible in Hope Valley, although to begin with, there was quite a lot of energy there. But on page 65, I'm going to have to get it up, sorry. Under develop the local visitor economy. As you know, Hope Valley, and I believe some other places occasionally, are absolutely inundated with visitors. So I just thought, couldn't this be looked at in a different way rather than just suggesting that everywhere needs more visitors? I thought, could it be something like encouraging high quality and sustainable high quality, economically and environmentally sustainable tourism, so that it sort of encompasses the idea that tourism has got to be sustainable in every sense. I mean, it's got to be economically sustainable, but it's also got to be environmentally sustainable and sustainable and sort of not inundate villages. You know, I don't know the statistics, but most people, certainly in the Hope Valley, don't actually work in the visitor economy. So, so can that be rephrased, please?
Yeah, no, I think we can have a look at the phrasing of it. I mean, to a certain extent, it's intended as sort of a bit of a catch-all. there are
Well,
some
yeah,
bits of the visitor economy where we are wanting to get more visitors into some places within the High
yes,
Peak.
indeed.
But obviously, there are the particular challenges sort of that you mentioned around the Hope Valley. To a certain extent, some of it will be around working on initiatives like the Mini Switzerland scheme that sort of the funding for it's come through, and how that can work to sort of improve access to it, but hopefully improving that access to the patch, but without clogging it up as much as
Well, yeah,
some of the access to it is at the moment. So it's not just purely around getting more visitors in. A lot of it is around trying to make sure that we've got the right sort of infrastructure, in a sense, in place to be able to accommodate for that.
well, it
And
needs
there
to
is
say
particular
that.
work that goes on with Visit Peak District around what can we do to try and make those lesser, just as lovely places to visit, but lesser known than the Instagram hotspots. How can we make sure that some of those are shared so that more places can take the load? But yeah, no, we can take
Okay,
that on
well,
in terms of the wording.
Needs to say that. I did have a couple of other questions which are more general, and one criticism, I'm afraid. I just wondered how councillors were going to input. This was actually on page 49 specifically that I sort of picked up on it. So this was a planning, locality plans, how the High Peak Borough councillors going to be involved in that, and hopefully we will be involved for our localities, but it didn't make that clear really.
The intention via sort of Lyndon's team is we will be looking at a couple of workshop type sessions involving particular borough councils, but also where they exist sort of any existing parish and town councils and other organisations, particularly sort of the voluntary sector, just to make sure we've got those voices in. But it will be looking at sort of, well, I suspect it'll be a more intimate workshop style session for yourselves, as there's only the two of you over in the Hope Valley, in a sense. It'll probably be a bit of a bigger workshop session, say for like the Glossop or the Buxton ones, because there's a few more folk. But yeah, no, the intention is to sort of have some workshop sessions to make sure we've got that member input.
Okay, good. And I must say, I mean, talking of sort of involving people, I think that the parish forums are really good. So, yeah, there are a couple of other things. That's okay.
So,
10 30 neighbourhood working, that's good. It's proposed that the town and locality partnerships will be established alongside the locality plans. I mean, this makes it sound as if they're going to be sort of two different things going on, but presumably the partnerships will be making the plans, won't they?
The challenge we've got at the moment is we've been told by government that there'll be some level of guidance coming out as to what they expect area forums to be. As we haven't got that guidance at the moment, we're trying to sort of get a bit of a jump on it. We're badging them as sort of the town and locality partnerships, just essentially until we get a better name for them. But they will be using the sort of those area plans to be able to work in. And as you'll know from sort of some of the stuff we're looking at with the parish forum, in terms of sort of looking at where we can or where it's appropriate to get some of the parishes sort of working together more closely in terms of those sort of cluster arrangements. So that it's trying to give it a title for something that we don't know exactly what it is at the moment, because we're sort of pulling all the various strands together.
Okay, I just think if the parishes saw this, because they are already, when I've said there's going to be these parish forums or neighbourhood forums rather of some sort, and going, oh gosh, they take away High Peak and then they replace them with something else. And that's probably true, I'd have thought it's probably true in other places in Hope Valley as well. So I think, it's going to be really simple language without too many, we're going to have this and we're going to have that in terms of the organisation, or people are going to be put off. Do you mind if I go on, Chair?
Yeah, I think you had one more, Joanna, then it's Councillor Quinn, but nobody else has got their hand up, so it's fine.
Yeah, on page, well, beginning on page 75, I thought I couldn't quite understand what this was all about. I mean, it looks like a very long list of what leadership means without really very much focus. So this was place leadership. There is a small, it says placed. I think it
Yeah.
should say place. Yeah.
It's more.
It's a very, it looks like a sort of brainstormy type thing, and I couldn't quite understand what it was really trying to get at. Because I mean, on these 3 pages, an awful lot of bullet points, and it sounded, is this early stages of thinking about this? What is it? What's it actually trying to, what's its real focus? What are the real outcomes?
Well, we're wanting to make sure that in terms of putting together the locality plans, that we cover absolutely everything within those local areas. In some cases and some places, there's already sort of groups and organisations that are working together a little bit that have already addressed some of the points that are sort of on those lists. Whereas in some places across the borough, we've not got anything there. So we're
Okay.
just wanting to make sure that we're covering sort of everything, making sure that we've got a bit of a framework in place to make sure that we collect all the information together and we don't miss anything out.
Well, in that case, perhaps you should have more emphasis on collecting information, which seems to me absolutely fair enough. Working with the communities. There is another thing I was going to say that's quite a small thing where it sounded as if we were imposing on the communities. So, it's not clear what exactly the council is doing within this list. And I think from what you're saying, it's collecting information, working with the communities, collecting as much information as possible, and then working with the communities to develop the plans. I mean, why is the list so long and difficult to follow?
I think what I got from the context of this, just reading through it, was if you took like in my ward, I've got a parish council at Hartington Upper Quarter. That is pretty much the only organisation that exists in that place. So it would be it. But if you look to the rest of Buxton, then there's a lot of different organisations, and you've got to collect a lot of information on them. And I think that basically creates part of the confusion, Joanna, because you're trying to describe 2 things at the same time that covers the entirety of the High Peak.
Well, yeah, I can see that, but I think it needs to be much, much clearer about what the council's leadership role is and how it will work with. I'm thinking really, because I assume that there's a parish forum, town and parish council forum on Thursday. I assume that this will be covered in some way, and if this was presented to them, they would, not know what's going on. So I just think it needs to be more focused.
And it's a little bit that double-edged sword. In some places there's already a bit of a coming together, and we've got some of this information sort of already on file. In some places there's not that coming together already, so we are starting from scratch. So it's just to make sure that we've effectively covered all the bases. And we also don't want to go in and say, this is the plan for your locality, without having had that engagement piece first.
Yeah, no, I totally agree, but it doesn't say that. So I wasn't sure what it was saying. Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Joanna. Councillor Quinn.
Okay, I have got something else, but I want to pick up on what Councillor Collins was saying in terms of what's important to local people and the working with local groups. So thinking about what's important to their area, engagement with groups like, I don't mean really we are Buxton, but certainly talking to people in Buxton about the assets that they want to be retained in that area and working with them in order to do that. I think that's important across the board, and I want to see how we're going to do that and make a real effort to do it. I'm also a little bit concerned about whether there is a conflict between efficiency savings and economising, because I don't really see the benefit of us taking a surplus into a new authority if we've increased parking charges, squeezed money out of people in order to economise, but actually had a detrimental effect on retail in our local areas. And I think that is something that we really, really need to be mindful of. Like Joanna, I'm really concerned about the tourist economy, because I'm very mindful of the fact that tourist jobs don't pay people enough to live here. And I think we need to be very careful about any emphasis on tourism for all kinds of reasons. And then the other thing that I wanted to say about Buxton is we really need to be talking to Derbyshire Dales, because loads of the shoppers, loads of the people who use Buxton as their main town aren't people who live in Highgate at all. So we need to be consulting with those people. That's it.
Yeah,
Really.
I think take those points on board. I think, you know, as I said sort of earlier, sort of it's not just around sort of engaging with the groups that are already existing. Sort of, you know, We Are Buxton is great for some things, but we know it doesn't necessarily reach all parts of the community. So it's around making sure that we've got a framework in place to be able to sort of engage with everyone, to make sure that as much as we can do, everyone's represented. In terms of sort of the efficiency type stuff, I mean, you know, Martin probably may not like this bit, but to me, I'm not necessarily looking at sort of us having to sort of put charges up. You know, this is around sort of trying to make sure that we can maintain existing services and sort of make sure we're getting those efficiencies out of how those services are organised, so that we're not having to put costs up. I think, you know, particularly sort of given, you know, our potential sort of limited time that we have left, we want to try and sort of make sure that we're covering the costs that we need to, but making sure that in terms of those, and there's a range of those schemes that are sort of detailed throughout the legacy plan, making sure that we've used, you know, we're responsible with the money, but sort of, you know, we're not keeping great hoards of it sort of on a back shelf. If there's stuff that we want to get done before we cease to exist, we want to get it done. But we've also got to sort of keep operating until the end.
Chris, can I
You're
just...
muted, Chair.
Councillor Quinn.
Yeah, sorry, there was one thing I forgot. Sorry, in all that. Leisure facilities. I think we need to be ambitious, and I know how expensive it is, but I do think we are short of leisure facilities. And I'd like us. I know that money is difficult. I know that it is a really hard thing to do, but we are under swimming pooled. I'm not sure that that's a phrase that makes sense, but I think that we are. I think we don't have an all-weather running track. People have to go out of area for so many things, and I'd like to see us try to engage with that. Maybe not from our point of view, but maybe encouraging private providers if we could as well.
Okay.
Yeah, no,
Thanks,
I think with some of the leisure stuff, in some cases it may well be not around what we can get done in the sort of the limited time we've got remaining. In some cases it will be around trying to see sort of how we can either work with other providers for getting stuff done. And, you know, within Buxton sort of there's two potential new providers sort of that are, you know, made grand announcements on their plans, but we have to sort of try and wait and see sort of what some of the details of those may be. But also in some cases, some of this is going to be, in terms of some of the schemes that we're looking at, these are not going to be schemes that will get finished by 2028. In some cases, it's going to be schemes that we're going to be making sure that we've got them in good order and stacked on a shelf ready for the new council to sort of have a look at. And for those potential sort of differing budgets that may be available to the council on sort of a unitary basis that are just not available to us on the borough footprint.
Thanks for that. if there's no other questions, I've just got a couple of comments. So first of all, thanks, Anthony, for talking about that potential work we can do with EMCA before we even transition into a new authority. I think EMCA's starting to get a focus on what it wants to do, and I do think that from a jobs perspective, the High Peak is somewhere where we see quite a lot of science businesses base themselves, particularly because people value the leisure services, not necessarily the ones Rachel's talking about. I'm thinking more about the Peak Park and things like that. So I do think that there is some potential for us to spend some money, even if it is just doing some economic impact assessments for particular areas where we could promote science. My other comment is that I noted within the report that there was something about our existing leisure services, and it would be good to see that customer survey completed before we get to the end of this council, just so that we understand the advocacy of the users and also what their wants and needs are. I think it's a little bit overdue, so if we could get that accelerated, it would be really good.
Yeah, Chair. I mean, I'm always struck by the example of sort of, one of the businesses that I'm presuming are still in Chapel, but there used to be a sort of not quite very much a scientific sort of based firm that they located themselves in Chapel because although they don't have to ship sort of great big things, that most of the packages they were shipping in was sort of very small, so they chose Chapel for the good access to sort of get into Manchester Airport, etc. for that. But they chose here as the place to go because they wanted that sort of leisure stuff. And anything that we can do to try and sort of strengthen people picking us for that type of thing, and the potential for sort of up at Harper Hill with the university and the health and safety exec labs, there must be potential for sort of getting a few more businesses being located up there. So I think anything that we can do to try and get some EMCA support to be able to sort of focus that a little bit has got to be worth trying to do. And then in terms of sort of moving the plan on, sort of that particular bit on the leisure stuff, each time we have an SOB sort of the operating board sort of, they get tantalizingly close to sort of saying they've got the framework in place to be able to do that survey, and I do hope to God at some point they will get it done fairly soon.
Thanks for that. So if there's no other comments, I think we had two recommendations here. One was to consider the legacy plan as attached in Appendix A and make any suggestion for amendments before the executive's consideration for approval. I think we've done that. I don't think there's anything to vote on there. And then the second part was to note the proposed update of the Select Committee work programmes via the Select Committee programme group to reflect the legacy plan as refreshed in the borough plan. Again, I don't think there was anything to vote on there unless anybody's got a counter opinion. No? Okay, excellent. I think that allows us to move on to the next item on the agenda then, which was the Select Committee work programme. People probably note that we sort of come to the end of that programme, although the annual report will then hang over to the next meeting. We were supposed to have a meeting of chairs to agree the next programme, and I think that will happen between now and the next meeting. For the life of me, I can't remember why we delayed the last one. I need to reach out back to Lyndon. Has anybody got any comments or questions? No? Okay. Fabulous. Thanks for that. So with that, do we have any questions referred to the executive member, member services, or any questions at least 4 days prior to the meeting? I don't think we do, Rachel. I'm just double checking.
No, none, Chair.
No. Okay, fine. So with that, I'll move to item 11, which is the exclusion of the press and public. To resolve that the press and public excluded from the meeting during consideration of the following items of business, as there may be disclosure of exempt information as defined in Part 1 of Schedule 12A of the Local Government Act 1972. So I'll just allow Rachel some time to stop the recording.